Hi, I'm Judy, the YouTube lawyer. Today's live stream show features another special guest, attorney Jonathan Michaud, who is from Boston. And he has his own solo practice that he started just last year. But for the majority of his career, he worked for insurance defense law firms in the Boston area. So we're going to focus more in this show about what life is like when you work for an insurance defense law firm. So let's introduce Attorney Michaud, who is also an alumnus of University of Maryland Law School. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Judy. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Yeah, as we were just talking, I'm kind of stressed out because I just got some more work dumped on me. So excuse me if I seem a little distracted.
Well, that's the life of a litigation lawyer.
Yeah, unfortunately.
The good news is I got my hair cut today just for your show. So.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. And hi, Christy. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I didn't give as much advance warning or try to post all over the place about this live stream. So it's great when people do show up. I would like to give a shout out to one of my frequent commenters and subscribers, my YouTuber friend, Dr. Severine Bryan, who has her YouTube channel. I bought one of her shirts. It says financial freedom looks good on you. So please check out her channel, Dr. Sev Talks Money, which is a financial channel. And she has been a guest also on a legal show where we discuss divorce law. So, okay, well, getting back to you, would you like to tell us more about your career and what it was like working for insurance defense law firms?
Yeah, well, I first started off, I clerked for a year for the Superior Court, which is the state trial court. And then I worked at an insurance defense firm called Cornell and Golub. At the time, I would say it had about eight attorneys, but it was well established, and they had very good clients, Mercedes and BMW and Chrysler, etc. And they did a lot of product liability work and things like that. A lot of personal injury defense. The vast majority of it was insurance defense. And there's all types of firms that you can go and work for after after law school or after you clerk. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both. But I worked there at Cornell and Golub for 5 years. And then I transferred to a mid-sized firm, which probably had about 50, I'd say 50, 55 attorneys. I moved there in 2012. And then I worked there until August of last year. And then I opened my solo practice. So I did work from 2007 until 2021 in insurance defense. So it was... it's a good way to start out, because one of the good things about it is, if you just go to a firm, is you go to the firm and you plug in, and you don't have to worry about anything else, which you do as a solo managing the business. All you have to worry about is you get given your Westlaw subscription, you get given the computer, the case management system, and off you go. So it's a good way to just focus on the law and learning the litigation nuts and bolts.
Mm-hmm. And did you specialize in a certain type of litigation, or did you get all sorts of things like auto accidents or slip and fall premises liability, homeowners disputes?
Well, yeah, when at Cornell and Golub, it was mostly product liability cases. We did get the odd slip and fall. We didn't do any car accident cases. We got cases involving well, I give you a couple of examples. We got cases involving it's a terrible case actually, where someone had one of those ride-on lawnmowers and they backed over their child and killed their child.
Oh.
And the allegation was that the lawnmower hadn't been designed properly. It was a defective design case. That was in federal court. And then I had another case where a gentleman was working at Coca-Cola. one of these mixing machines, and a piece of equipment that was rotating really fast to mix the drinks. It fell over and fell down on his shoulder and broke his shoulder. And again, the allegation was that the design was defective. So we mostly did product liability stuff. We did some vehicle design cases where they alleged that a defective design caused a rollover or something like that. We did do actually some lemon law stuff, just a little bit. There are what I would call sort of lemon law mills. There are these firms that just churn out what are called 93A letters, which is like a consumer protection, lemon law letters, that kind of thing, where they'll send a letter saying, you know, I bought this car and it's broken down 3 times in the last year, and it's a lemon. And these consumer laws in Massachusetts, a lot of them allow the plaintiff to recover attorney's fees. So that's, you know, in usual litigation, you pay for your own costs, you know. But so you have to. So those are cases which they can be small, but they can have exposure for attorney's fees. So we did a lot of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, interesting. So, but what was life like when you were a new attorney? For example, what was the hierarchy like at your firm, and were you, you know, working under the surveillance or supervision of a partner? How did it work?
Well, it was at Cornell and Goller. What was great about it was that Pete Durney, who ran the firm and still runs it, he was a very experienced trial attorney, but he would just let you work the cases up. And if you had a question, he would just say, "Oh, come and see me," and he would give you advice. But in the nuts and bolts of things like, you know, drafting the answer to the complaint, drafting discovery, responding to discovery, responding to requests for admissions, taking depositions, you would basically do the vast majority of that. He would occasionally step in if there was a high exposure case, and maybe the client wanted Pete to take the deposition, or, you know, there was a very important motion that needed to be argued, and he'd want, you know, the in-house people would want Pete Durney to do it. And why not? Because still is, you know, he's a great attorney, and he was a good guy. It was a good place to learn to start off. But it was funny, actually, because I was thinking about this beforehand. I did work on some litigation involving pharmaceuticals, and we were sort of local counsel for these cases, and we were working with a big law firm, swanky law firm out of New York or DC, and we were working with their associates. And one of the things I figured out after a while is that they had a team, of course, of like 10 people on the case, billing the hell out of it, I'm sure. They had an associate who I figured out was literally his only job was to edit the footnotes in motions. Like nothing.
Oh my God, that's excessive.
Yes, so don't get me wrong, he was making a lot more money than I was, so I probably would have swapped places with him. But it made me laugh because I was like, I'm working all these cases up completely and doing everything. And there was a big law associate who was literally just drafting and editing footnotes in motions, and that was his job. So the good thing about being in a smaller firm is that you get more substantive experience. The bad thing is that the pay is not as good. But another good thing is that basically you have to bill 1,800 hours a year, which if you took, you know, 3 or 4 weeks vacation, that works out to about 37.5 hours a week, which is doable. You know, yeah, there were some times where you have to come in at weekends or work late, you know, like any job, but it was a good place in terms of lifestyle, and we had a good bunch of people. So that was my first job, and like I said, I did that for 5 years. Probably wouldn't have been as long as I've said before, apart from the crash that happened in September of 2008, destroyed all the job market basically.
I see. Now, so as a new lawyer working for that firm, did you have any client contact, or were you able to do depositions or go to court?
Yeah, we would sit in on all the client meetings. You know, client meetings, usually the managing partner would be there. I argued motions, I argued summary judgment motions, discovery motions. We took, you know, all the depositions. I think at first, you're not going to take expert depositions, in the first couple of years probably, but yeah, you were basically you were doing everything to work the case up, and if you had a question, you would go and see Pete, the managing partner, and he'd set you straight. So yeah, it was a good place to get great experience, for sure.
That's great. Well, what were your work hours normally like? Like, could you leave by about 6 or 7?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was basically sort of 9 to 6, I think, were officially the hours, and now when I started, you had to wear a suit every day, and obviously that's kind of relaxed a bit, and which is good because I hate wearing suits.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was sort of 9 to 6. I think we got 3 weeks vacation, and there was a support staff there, a few paralegals. As I think I talked about her before, but the head paralegal there was great because she was just no BS, and if you made a mistake, she would just come down on you like a ton of bricks, and you'd never forget it. So that was Cheryl, the head paralegal. So she was great, and yeah, no, it was a good place to learn, that's for sure. And they did a lot of high quality work and a lot of big exposure cases. But one of the bad things about working in insurance defense is dealing with sort of insurance companies, and they like to cut like every bill by 20%. They have these computer programs which pick out words that they don't like. It's not even a person looking at the bill. And then they get back to you and they say, oh well, you've got to cut this bill by 20%, and you can appeal it to our head office or whatever, and all that stuff. That takes time.
Yeah, that must be frustrating, but so a lot of times the client is not really an actual person, right? Like, don't you answer more to insurance adjusters or people who work for the insurance company who are not lawyers?
Yeah, you basically, a lot of the time you are doing your reports to the insurance companies, whoever they are, and there'll be a head adjuster on the case, and a lot of the time the meetings would just be you and the adjuster, or you would just daily communication would be between you and the adjuster. If there was a really big thing or they were prepping for trial, then maybe they'd bring the in-house person in. But yes, you're basically dealing with the insurance person. That's who you would have to ask for authority to get authority to settle the case. If you had a mediation, the adjuster would usually be at the mediation, not someone from the company. Some of our clients were self-insured, so that was different. It's actually much easier dealing with self-insured companies. So you cut out the middleman. But yes, you basically were dealing with insurance companies. But if you're dealing with an insurance company, mega insurance company, an adjuster could have 300 cases. So a lot of the time, they don't know the case like you, or they don't really understand it. Like if you're working on a case, you probably have cases yourself right now where you've been immersed in it for 2 or 3 years. You know everything about that. You're dealing with it on a daily basis. Whereas an adjuster is kind of like, oh, geez, I better dust off this file. I've got a mediation coming up next week. So
yeah,
sometimes it's quite hard to get them to understand the good points and the bad points, but.
Yeah, and that's why I also think it's important that regular people understand that this whole relationship between the insurance company, the attorney that's provided through the insurance company, and how they're supposed to interact. Because I have been involved as privately retained counsel to help homeowners who had coverage through their homeowners insurance policy for something totally wacky that you wouldn't really think would be covered by insurance. And sometimes those people just kept wanting to have frequent meetings and constant phone calls, constantly emailing the attorney that was really hired by the insurance company. And I would have to tell these people that, look, you can't keep contacting that other attorney as if they're your private attorney, because they're under budget constraints, right? And they're not going to keep getting paid to have nonstop conferences with you over this case, especially when the attorney might have 100 cases that they're responsible for.
Yeah, you're lucky. You know, sometimes you're lucky if you get a response. But yeah, no, you know, most of the adjusters, I just get the feeling that they were quite swamped, you know, and that could be a problem for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you, as the attorney, you have to wait for authorization or you have to wait to hear back from the insurance person, then you're kind of at their mercy where it might take weeks before you hear back from them, right?
Yeah, well,
Discussing.
yeah, one of the problems is, you know, insurance companies, like most of corporate America, it's also hierarchical. So you could be at a mediation with an adjuster and you're like, oh, great, you know, John here sitting next to me is going to sign off on, you know, whether we settle the case. And then you're like, and he's like, oh, I don't have the power to do that. I've got to call Fred, and Fred's got to call Mark, and Mark's got to call John. And, you know, they're calling people higher up in the insurance company who literally know nothing about the case and say, oh, can we get another 20 grand? We could settle this right now, or whatever it is. So it can be hard to you know, it can be hard to move quickly with insurance companies because they're big corporations with hierarchy and they just act slowly.
Yeah, and you did mention earlier that the pay wasn't that great compared to, you know, humongous big corporate law firms. Do you mind telling us a range of what the pay might be for a new attorney
I
for
mean, I'm not
insurance
sure.
defense?
I'm honestly not sure what it is now. When I started off, I would say it was between 60. You'd start off between, well, this was 2007. You'd start off between maybe 58 and 65. But there were some firms who shall remain nameless that I know that do a lot of insurance defense with more attorneys in them, and they wanted like 2,000 hours a year and were paying and would offering like $70,000 a year, which to me is just crazy. But you know, the lawyers who work in Boston sort of know who those firms are, and well, we all do, and they would avoid them. I remember when I worked at Cornell and Golub, my friend got an offer to work at one of these firms, and she just thought it was crazy. You know, the firm was actually offended when she said, "I'm not doing 2,000 hours a year for $70,000." So she told them to get stuffed. So good for her.
Yeah, but that also has to do with whether your friend had options or not. I mean, for some law graduates, they're just happy to get a job and it's with a real law firm. So, you know,
Yeah.
I guess a lot of people take it because that's the best they can get out of law school.
Well, yeah, she actually ended up working for the federal government doing labor law, which was a much better deal. But if you notice these mid-sized firms that want, you know, tons of hours and crappy pay, they go through associates like toilet paper. I mean, you can you know, you can check and you see if you could work on a case for 2 or 3 years. I'd be working on a case for 2 or 3 years, and I'd have like there'd be 3 different associates. Oh, Jack's left now. Now Judy's in, and you know Judy's left, and now Mike's in, and so they don't retain people, but that's not their business model. They're not trying to retain people. They don't care. Someone
Yeah.
else will hire someone else out of law school, and then they'll be like, well, that's great because now we can hire someone out of law school, and instead of paying them 72,000, we can pay them 60,000. So we've saved $12,000 for the same amount of work, and we bill them out at the same rate. So, you know, insurance defense. If you talk to some of the older attorneys that worked in the, you know, back in the 70s, early 80s, back then they would just literally chuck a bill in for legal services rendered, and it would get paid. Now you've got a situation where these insurance companies, they cut the bill. Insurance defense rates have gone like, I was working, some clients were paying, you know, $200 an hour, which is peanuts. If you consider that like a lot of commercial litigation attorneys, you know, bill out at, you know, $400, $500, $600, $700 an hour. So the rates have really been pushed down. And I guess the insurance companies kind of hold the whip hand against these firms because they just say, oh, you don't like it? Well, guess what? We'll fire you and we'll take the business to another firm because there's someone, it's a race to the bottom because there's someone who will do it for $200. There's someone who will do it for 190 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to get some experience in insurance defense. You're not going to get rich, not unless you have a huge book of business and you're that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know the exact dollar figures, but the pay for those types of firms around North Carolina are even lower than what you said for the Boston area. I'm just thinking that the pay is probably closer to starting salary of like about, upper 50,000s to
Right.
60 something thousand. And the people I know who have worked for those firms, it seemed like they were so stressed out and working all the time. And when I did work with some of the attorneys at those types of law firms, um, it was just almost impossible to get the person on a phone call or on a conference call when we had to schedule the appointment with our clients and multiple people because these attorneys are constantly driving around to different courthouses or they have hearings almost every day. There's always something to prepare for, or a deadline, or depositions, or mediation. So they're stuck all day and they can't talk. So, yeah, I mean, it sounded like very stressful, even for the person I knew who made partner at one of those firms. I kind of felt sorry for her, but, it seemed like she was unmarried and had no children. So she was able to put up with that. I mean, some people don't mind that nonstop, go and run and take care of this one case. And then suddenly you're jerked onto another case and, hearing after hearing. It sounds very tough to me. So, yeah.
It is a good place to cut your teeth maybe for a couple of years. And as I've said before, insurance defense jobs are, there are a lot of them out there when you start off. Plaintiffs firm jobs, they're far fewer. Getting a good federal job is harder. So those are, for a lot of people, that's kind of like the standard litigation job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, Serena is here again. Thanks for being here. She says, how does your practice bring you to a federal court? Can an attorney who has any state license represent clients on a federal court nationwide?
Well, what usually would happen I'll give you an example. The plaintiff files a case in state court in Massachusetts, and generally the state court is considered a better jurisdiction, better than federal court for a number of reasons, which I won't bore you with at the moment. But
yeah, like more sympathetic judges usually.
Yeah, maybe more sympathetic judges, maybe a better jury pool. If you can get the jury pool for downtown Boston might be better, or downtown Philadelphia or Baltimore, wherever you are. And there are other things to do as well with experts, but then the defense might be able to remove the case based on the diversity jurisdiction and remove it to federal court, which the common wisdom was that was better for the defense to be in federal court. So that was how it would usually happen in Massachusetts. To get licensed in or admitted in federal court, all you have to do is you pass a Massachusetts bar. And then when I did it, you had to wait 1 year. And once you'd waited 1 year, you just had to fill out the federal court, district court form and pay the $200, go to federal court. And then the federal judge would swear you in, and that was it. You didn't have to take a test or anything. So most people, for example, if you're licensed in your state, you'll also be licensed in the federal district court for that state. So that's usually how it works.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I recall, filling out an application and showing that I already had a valid state license and then paying, maybe it was a couple of $100s back then. I'm sure it's more now, but you have to pay a fee and then you have to go to a ceremony at the federal courthouse to get sworn in by a judge. And so ultimately I got a certificate saying that I was licensed to practice in the certain district of the federal court in North Carolina. So you still have to get admitted before you can practice. But I think for me, it's been very rare to get cases in federal court, even though I do employment discrimination cases also, which is federal law. But amongst the plaintiff's attorneys, we always think that it is better to stay in state court. So if you can stay in state court, then you would prefer to do that than having your case filed immediately in federal court. And but I mean, there are benefits to me, in doing cases in federal court, mainly because they have e-filing. They have a very good e-filing system where you don't ever have to drive all the way to the courthouse and go to the clerk's office to physically hand in papers. I mean, it's so old school, but we still have to do that in state court, even though they were supposedly going to have an e-filing system. So.
Yeah, that's true. When I started in 2007, federal court had ECF filing, electronic filing, which was fantastic. It was great. Mm-hmm. And they still have that, of course. Now more states are moving to e-filing. I think Rhode Island moved to e-file and serve maybe 5 years ago. Massachusetts has just kind of done that now. The other thing about in federal court, you're entitled to take expert depositions, whereas in Massachusetts, you have to get leave of court to do that. So most plaintiffs would rather, not have their experts deposed. In federal court, you basically get the same judge. You get the same judge for the whole case, which I prefer, because then they know the case. Whereas in state court, our judges circulate, so they'll be, 6 months in Boston, 5 months in Worcester, and they travel around. So if your case is on the state court docket for a few years, you'll get some different judges, and that's tricky because they have to sort of, they're not familiar with the case, so it's a little bit trickier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here in North Carolina. You might have a totally different judge for one motion, and then you do another motion hearing in front of a different judge that has to totally relearn the case, or start from zero to figure out what the facts are. Yeah. So Serena also asked, why do you think the pay is so low in a great deal of legal positions such as insurance defense? Is it because there are so many law graduates every year? Probably, like supply and demand. I think the fact that people are willing to take it.
Yeah, I mean, you can thank the law schools for that, for pumping out, thousands more graduates into the market than is needed, than there are legal jobs. So of course, someone who runs, an insurance defense firm, they're not going to pay you more than they have to, and that's what they can get away with. They want you to bill as much as possible and pay you as little as possible, and that's the business model. And yeah, if you have, Massachusetts a lot. I'm just trying to think. It probably has 7 law schools, maybe. Wow. And it's crazy. But no one in the legal establishment holds these law schools to account. That's one of the major problems. And frankly, a lot of that is to do with the fact that a lot of their friends have positions, very overpaid positions, working in administration at law schools and tenured professors and all the rest of it. So, I told you last time I was here, they had this expose 10 years ago where the head of New England Law School was making nearly $1 million a year.
Yeah.
I'm from England. I've never heard of a head of a school making £1 million a year. That was just unheard of. But in America, anything goes, it seems, and no one holds these law schools to account. It's absolutely bonkers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the consumer.
I'm going to start drinking my coffee again.
Okay. Yeah, but then the fact that the consumer, which is the would-be law students, don't know any better, or they're all too easily persuaded by the slick marketing materials from these crappy law schools. So they're all still willing to flock there, and then they get the federal student loans to go there. So, it's kind of like this sad machine where it continues the cycle of low wages and, just being tied to debt and financial woes that a lot of young lawyers have, assuming you pass the bar and get to be a lawyer.
Well, that you're exactly right. One of the problems, I think, is that the federal loan system has created this huge pool of money. And if you're a law school and you're a sort of you're a rational actor, right? There's all this loan money sloshing around. Of course, you're going to raise your tuition every year because people can always borrow the money. As long as they're not a felon and have a pulse, they can sign the note, and they can borrow the money. So that's why law schools have been just continually raising tuition, and they can. It would be like if Honda got paid for every car that came out of their factory, and they didn't have to worry about selling the car, they would be making thousands of cars a day. They'd be running 24/7. And for law schools, all that matters is they get the law students in there and they pump them out after 3 years. They don't care whether you have a job or not. It's not their problem. It's your problem. Mm-hmm. And you will never hear. You'll hear a lot now from politicians about, the little guy. We need to help the little guy. We need to cancel student loan debt. Well, of course that sounds nice, but they don't want to deal with the systemic problem of the whole setup, which is banks making money off interest, law schools making out like bandits and overpaying everybody who works there, and the students getting screwed over. They need to, it's crazy. It's like, it's like having someone do liposuction while they're, eating in McDonald's. I mean, it's bonkers.
Okay, that's a good, funny analogy. Yeah. Hi, Sonia, Elaine. Thank you for being here. And thanks, Christy, also. So, hi, Nature Lover. Nice to see you again on the live stream. Why doesn't the same judge stay with the same case in state court? Wouldn't it be better and more efficient to have the same judge? Yeah, I'm just guessing, but maybe whoever created the system probably thought that it would be good to have judges rotating so that there's no provincialism or just cronyism within a county, because at least in my state there are plenty of like smaller towns and smaller counties where people might otherwise feel like they can't get a fair shake because of the judge knowing everybody or knowing certain lawyers and the good old boy system or something. So perhaps they thought that it would be more fair if you just didn't even know which judge was going to show up that week, or they have different judges every 6 months. But in family law cases, though, at least in my county, they do try to keep the same family law judge for the case during the whole entire time the case is going on. So, for example, if someone has a divorce case plus a custody case, it could still be the same judge that you see 5 years down the road when you try to modify your custody order. So what about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think it's the same reason you said, is that they don't want these little fiefdoms being created where, the judge out in Worcester or wherever is there for so long that he becomes entrenched, and it's more likely that there's going to be favoritism and possibly corruption. And so I get the idea behind it is probably a sound one, but it is a problem in civil litigation where you have different judges. I do think in Massachusetts that they have, I think for business litigation, for complex business litigation, they have the BLS session in the state court, and I believe that has just the same judge for that whole case. But these are sort of very high stakes, very complex business litigation cases, and you have to sort of pass a certain threshold to get into that session. But for a garden variety civil case, yeah, you could see a lot of different judges. But it's funny because I remember once when I was at Cornell and Garlob, the client was like, "Oh, we've got to get into federal court. We've got to get into federal court." Well, you have to explain to the client that if you get what's considered a bad judge or a bad draw, because there are some judges who are better than others, and some who might be better for you or worse for you. If you get a bad draw, then you're stuck with that judge for the whole case. So, while federal court was sort of seen as better for defendants, it could be a problem if you've got a difficult judge. So it swings and roundabouts, really.
Yeah. Okay. And another question to clarify, is insurance defense law when lawyers defend some professional, such as an accountant or doctor, from not doing something? It could be, but it's a much larger umbrella of law. If you'd like to explain that, Jonathan.
Yeah, there are cases like what I did, which was defending companies from personal injury lawsuits. And then there's other types of insurance defense, for example, professional malpractice. So say you're a lawyer and you did something wrong and you screwed someone's case up, like you blew the statute of limitations. You have an insurance company that insures you. And then if there's a case filed against you, then that there are lawyers who do that, who defend lawyers who are sued for malpractice. And then there are lawyers who defend dentists or doctors or hospitals in medical malpractice cases and things like that. So yeah, I think a lot of the accountants probably have professional insurance too, in case they screw up someone's accounts completely and then they get unfairly investigated by the IRS or something and it costs them an arm and a leg. So yeah, there are different areas of liability, but basically when the insurance company comes in, they end up paying for the legal fees, and they also usually end up paying for any settlement or any verdict. Usually they don't pay for punitive damages. And insurance companies are smart enough to put that in the contract where they're like, we don't insure punitive damages, but that's how it works usually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as well as, like I mentioned, homeowners insurance. A lot of times people have homeowners insurance that actually even covers lawsuits against the person, even when it didn't happen in your home. So one of the cases that I had dealt with someone who was having a lot of trouble with a crazy neighbor that lived down the street that was constantly harassing the wife and the kid. And I think he had mental problems, obviously, screaming and yelling at them and gesturing at them anytime they drove by. So my client, the wife, tried to get a domestic violence or a protective order against the crazy neighbor, and then didn't show up to the court hearing because they had a vacation. And so anyway, I'm not sure how much I can say about it, but lo and behold, their insurance company, for the homeowners insurance company, did cover this kind of lawsuit to defend them, but they still wanted to hire me as their own private family lawyer because they felt like they needed a conduit between themselves and the insurance company's attorney. So it was a very interesting case, and we were able to settle it. Other kinds of cases are, where a homeowner might get sued over, I don't know, any sort of tort, and their insurance company then jumps in and says, okay, that's covered. We're going to defend you. Here's your lawyer from this law firm that's going to defend you. So
yeah, I think it's probably true that even lawyers don't exactly know. Like most people have homeowners policies, and they have an umbrella policy too. And you're not entirely aware, maybe unless you do insurance coverage as your practice area, like what exactly you would be covered from and what you wouldn't be covered from. So but yes, and make sure that you have a good umbrella policy.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about this other very crazy case that I handled where originally we thought that my client's homeowner's insurance would cover this lawsuit to defend him, but then they said, no, we're not covering it because the person suing you is your spouse and you guys are both in the same household. So then the person ended up having to hire me as private counsel to defend him in a very unusual lawsuit, which I probably can't say too much about. Yeah, but I think in a way, doing insurance defense, if you're not pigeonholed into a very tiny niche, then it could be very interesting because you could deal with a totally different area of law or have to learn a totally new thing, depending on what kind of case gets thrown your way.
Yeah, no, I think there are areas that even in employment cases, employment discrimination cases, they might be covered by insurance, but there are certain areas of the law which are more versatile, and I've talked about this before, about transitioning out of a law firm and maybe going in-house, like employment law, labor law, patent law, IP law, that kind of stuff. It's difficult to transition from personal injury insurance defense to an in-house position, but that's just the way it goes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Nature Lover wants to know, what are punitive damages exactly? How are punitive damages determined?
Well, punitive damages, as the name suggests, are there to punish the company for their conduct. And frankly, in a lot of cases, like in personal injury cases that I would do, you would rarely see punitive damages, because to get punitive damages, you almost have to prove that the level of conduct by the defendant was almost criminal. Like, so the standard is very high. Intentional, sort of reckless conduct that just shocks the conscience. And you do see it in some cases, but you don't really see it in personal injury cases. Sometimes in asbestos cases you would see punitive damages, but it's really, it depends. You probably have seen cases where they've awarded maybe 5 million in damages, and then they hit the company for 20 million or something in punitive damages. And but yes, that they're not usually covered by insurance, so the company has to pay those out of their own pocket, and they always get appealed. And sometimes, I think there was a case in Florida recently where I think they might have got hundreds of millions in punitive damages. Well, that will get appealed, and then it will probably be lowered by the judge, because it's just so crazy, out of bounds. But in terms of the multiplier, but and garden variety civil litigation, you don't really see that.
Yeah, and so that's where usually it becomes relevant, like what the gross revenue of, or how big the company is, how big the employer or whoever the defendant is. That becomes relevant in terms of calculating punitive damages, because you want to hit them in the pocket, right? So
yeah,
usually,
exactly. You're not usually, for example, I'll give an example, like in Rhode Island, which is probably in most cases, you don't get discovery on companies' revenue and that kind of thing. But if there's a punitive damages claim that survives, then you could potentially get discovery on that area. And it can be certainly a big risk for a company, and might make them more likely to settle. But in Massachusetts, punitive damages are only available in personal injury cases in death cases. So it's kind of weird that you can have someone who's like seriously injured, quadriplegic, or lost both their legs or something, a horrendous injury, and they can't get punitive damages. But you can only get punitive damages in a death case. So
that seems weird. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Serena asks, is insurance defense in any way connected or similar to personal injury? How does your existing skill sets from insurance defense transition into your current personal injury and other practices? I think it's very relevant, because you're still doing similar things, right? Like drafting motions, taking depositions, going to hearings.
Yeah, it's really well, to answer your first question, so if insurance defense is really like, consider that like the umbrella, and then you have the different areas coming off it. So, the insurance company may have insured a doctor and it's a medical malpractice case, or a personal company and it's a personal injury case. So insurance defense is like the big umbrella. In terms of the skill set, it's really just attention to detail. And, frankly, when you're getting paid by the hour and you're doing billable hours, you can spend your time really making sure something is, tickety boo. It's, you can spend your time doing things, but it's attention to detail. And so for a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer, when I was on the defense side, generally speaking, the plaintiff's work was a bit sloppier, but they're not getting paid by the hour. They're just getting paid to get that stuff out the door. So, but yeah, it's attention to detail, learning the law, and just getting better at doing things. when I first started off, I remember the first deposition I ever had to take was scheduled right before Christmas, and it ruined my Christmas because I was like so nervous about it, doing your first deposition. But after a while, you just do hundreds of them, and it's like, you could get up, you could look at the file the night before and do a good deposition. You just, like anything, you do it a lot and you get good at it, or you should do at least.
Oh, great. Okay. Let's see. I heard someone say insurance defense lawyers are less aggressive than a privately hired lawyer. Would you agree with this?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what this whole thing with, like, a lot of lay people say, I want a pit bull, I want an aggressive lawyer. Well, I don't really know about. It was one of the best lawyers that I encountered was a very experienced plaintiff's attorney in Boston, and he's a real gentleman, super nice guy, but just did really good work and was really smart, was really experienced, very economical, and those are the ones almost that you've got to watch out for, rather than the attorney who's like blustering and putting on a show for his client and sticking his finger in your face during an expert inspection or whatever, because none of that stuff really changes any of the facts or the law. But I'd rather have a competent attorney than someone who's just like going bananas all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, in my dealings with insurance defense attorneys, I've found plenty of them can be quite aggressive and loud, but as Jonathan said, that doesn't necessarily equate to competence. So,
yeah, I mean, in Boston, there are, lawyers who have a reputation, defense lawyers who have a reputation for being very unpleasant. For some reason, they seem to think that makes them a better lawyer. I have no idea why, but I won't mention who they are. We know who you are, though.
Yeah. Okay. And does defamation fall under personal injury? Yeah, I would say so, right? It's a tort. It's a civil wrong.
It's a tort, but I never had any cases for. I don't really consider that sort of personal injury. I consider that like a specialized subset. I think sometimes employment law, there are people who just sort of just specialize in defamation and libel, and I think some employment lawyers deal with this issue more, where someone gets arrested for doing something and then his employer comes out and does a statement on television saying, this employee behaved outrageously and we're firing them, and we're whatever the issue is, and then maybe the employee may have a claim for defamation sort of attached to their getting fired from a job or something like that. But in just like regular litigation, no, ours, we don't deal with hurt feelings. We basically deal with injured bodies. There are some emotional distress claims, negligent infliction of emotional distress, but they really we don't really do. They're sort of attached to the personal injury case usually. So it's really sort of bodily injury and loss of consortium and that kind of thing. But defamation, yeah. I never dealt with a defamation case.
Yeah, I have dealt with some defamation cases, and they're usually kind of strange and bizarre too, with some strange people involved. But one of the cases I dealt with negative reviews on Yelp, where a business owner decided to sue my client as well as some of his friends for leaving negative reviews about the business. And ultimately, the case was settled because the person's homeowner's insurance company was also involved, and so the insurance company made a little settlement there. But yeah, I mean, people will sue for anything, so you got to be careful also whenever you leave your online reviews. Make sure you just stick to the facts, and don't exaggerate or say anything that can be blatantly proven as false, because you could get hit with a defamation suit, right?
I think one of the problems, from what I understand, we're just dealing with one case the other day, was you have to prove in defamation like actual damages. So even if you prove that the person left a nasty review on Yelp or whatever, you have to show how that cost you money. So it's, in a lot of these cases, the person's really, might be really upset, and someone's done something, said something nasty about him, but you don't really have a case because you can't prove that he was actually damaged. It's one thing if someone puts on the internet that, oh, John Michaud's a pedophile and John Michaud owns a restaurant, and then the next day he has no customers for the next year. Well, and he goes out of business. Well, that's easy to prove, but most cases are not so clear cut. So.
Oh yeah, but sometimes plaintiffs still want to sue to drive home a point, and because they think the defendants have money, and so ultimately the case settled, even though the plaintiff didn't have any concrete evidence that he had lost business because of these negative reviews. Yeah, but anyway, let's see. Would you like to tell us a little bit more in general about your life as an insurance defense attorney? Because you did mention you went to a different firm after the first one, right?
Yeah, I went to a bigger firm that mostly did asbestos defense, and it was in the Seaport in Boston, by about 50 attorneys. It was great at the beginning, because asbestos defense is like another specialized subset of personal injury, and we would fly all around the country deposing people who were dying of mesothelioma, which is a disease of the lung lining. There's no cure for it. So if you have mesothelioma, you're probably going to die within 18 months, a couple of years. And we would take depositions of these plaintiffs, and we would fly all around the country doing it. And it was interesting. And we'd also do some general liability as well. So we still were doing some personal injury cases. I had a case, for example, another example of a PI case where there was a propane ignition, and it burned two people when they were filling up a tank. And so we had all sorts of cases I would mostly do Rhode Island and Massachusetts. That was the pay was much better, a bigger firm, more support, nicer office. I had a nice office looking out over the water and Logan Airport, seeing all the planes taking off. So that was nice. It was the pay was better. It was a good, and I was a partner there. I'm thinking I was an associate there for 4 years, and then I was a partner there for 5, I think. So I worked there from 2012 to 2021.
I see. Okay. Well, so what kind of people would enjoy doing this type of work? Like, can you describe in general? Like, you would be suited for this kind of job if you are what?
Probably if you are a bit risk averse, you're really into attention to detail. You're not maybe particularly entrepreneurial, and you just want to go into work and do your legal work and concentrate on that and not have to worry about anything else. And you know how much you're going to get paid at the end of the month. I'd probably say that would be the kind of person. And I don't think I think it is a good place for anyone to start off, just to cut your teeth. It's like I said at the beginning, the advantages of working at a smaller firm, maybe a firm with 10, 15, 20, 25 attorneys, is that you'll get a bit more support staff. Like, I wouldn't want to go to like a really small firm, like 2 attorneys or something like that, because I just don't feel like you have the support there. But there's a lot of good mid-sized firms in Boston you can work at and get some good experience and get taking depositions and doing discovery and all that kind of stuff. And then you can decide if you want to stay there or not. But
okay.
I mean, it's not the sexiest job in the world. It's not the most entrepreneurial job in the world. But
yeah.
But you have to have attention to detail. If you don't have that, then it's probably not the job for you.
Yeah. And you also have to be able to quickly switch gears to do tons of different cases and be on the go. And, if you're constantly going to different courthouses too, there's that additional stress factor of having to travel to different courthouses and places, depending on what your workload is. Okay, one last question. I heard defamation cases are done on a contingency. Is this true? I don't really think so. Not all the time. I mean, I certainly wouldn't take one on a contingency. They got to pay me something.
Yeah, I don't do defamation, but I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't take one on contingency. No, I know that some lawyers do a thing where they, that they maybe do sort of a hybrid model where some of the work they do is billable by the hour, and then maybe they take a percentage at the end. But I don't think I would. But you'd have to ask a defamation lawyer. I mean, it depend on how good the case is. But when you take a case on contingency, you're not all the hours work you do, you're not getting paid for, and you have to front all the expenses. Now, the expenses in a defamation case are probably going to be less than they are in a personal injury case, because you don't have to pay for, usually you don't have to pay for things like medical records and things. You may just get deposition transcripts and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the answer is probably no.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I sure wouldn't do it on a contingency. Like you said, hybrid model where maybe the person could pay like a big flat fee up front plus a lower percentage. There's got to be some money up front, because as you and I both know, sometimes the clients exaggerate, or it turns out your case isn't really as great as it looked like when it first walked in the door. So that's a big risk, especially for a defamation type of case. Yeah. So we're right here at about an hour. Thank you so much again for your time, Jonathan. I know, we're both such busy people. I got to go and work on this hot button issue that just arose.
Yeah. Good luck with that. And thanks for having me on. You got me fired up talking about the student loans anyway.
Yeah, I could sense your passion. That could be a totally different topic.
Yeah.
So.
We should let's do 3 hours on that next time. We'll give you
yeah, it'll be great. So why don't you hold on for a minute, Jonathan, and we'll say goodbye to our great viewers out there. Thank you, Serena, for being here again, and Kayak 7 Seas and Nature Lover. We appreciate your nice comments and questions. So
Serena is always on. God bless Serena.
Oh, yes. I guess she really wants to do her due diligence if she's going to apply to law school. Yeah. So best wishes, and we'll see you on the next live stream. Thanks, guys.